Our top story, Iran says the U.S. cannot carry on with its failed maximum pressure campaign and economic terrorism against the country while claiming to seek negotiations and an agreement at the same time. In a phone call with his Chinese counterpart, Iran's Foreign Minister Hossein Amir-Abdollahian expressed hope the U.S. and Europeans will take a realistic approach to the upcoming talks in Vienna so a deal could be achieved swiftly. Wang Yi said the U.S. is chiefly to blame for the embattled status of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. He expressed hope the U.S. will make amends by removing all anti-Iran sanctions. The top Iranian diplomat also had a phone conversation with his Russian counterpart. Amir Abdullahian said Iran will return to full compliance with the agreement if the U.S. fully implements its obligations and refrains from making demands outside the scope of the deal. Amir Abdullahian, however, pointed to the recent U.S. sanctions against Iran's drone program, saying that Tehran is skeptical about Washington's motives. Sergei Lavrov then said that all sides should resume implementing the deal, with the U.S. having to do so first. Joining us now from Bristol is Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, for more on the story. Hello, Tony. Hope you're safe and doing well out there in Bristol. Your thoughts on all the contradictions we're seeing from what the U.S. government says and what we're expecting it to do or not do?
Well, the United States always seems to be trying to squeeze more out of this apple, more juice than is actually in there. What they do, I mean, they do this many times. And I remember a couple of years ago, the Russian President Vladimir Putin saying that the United States is not deal ready. It's basically saying that if you're sitting down to try and negotiate with it, in a way, you're wasting your time. Now, I think, this is what we have to do. You've got to always try and negotiate. But it was really a great breakthrough for the world when the JCPOA was signed by President Obama back in 2015 with Iran. And what it did is it blocked out the Israelis. The Zionists really want to actually start conflict in the Middle East in order to drag the Americans into the Middle East, into that sort of one of the most important things in the world. And while the climate is important, of course it is, this is a reminder of what real international priorities are. There's been a lot of dwelling on the sort of fairyland of climate, but really what's important is that we can deal with the climate so long as we've got some sort of guarantee of peace in the Middle East. And that's exactly what this deal did. Now, as the US is saying, oh, well, Iran has got to do this and that and everything else before we'll... No, because the United States has got all these sanctions and pressures on other countries around the world to do sanctions against Iran. And also that Iran is not compliant with the deal when it comes to uranium enrichment. So what needs to happen is the United States must go back, re-sign the deal with all of the other participants as the sanctions begin to be lifted around the world against Iran, so then Iran can return to compliant nuclear power. So that seems to be obvious. A child can see that is what needs to happen if the US is serious about this deal, as Biden promised last year before he was elected, that he would re-sign this deal and he would put it back together. Actually, what seems to be happening is, he isn't the strongest personality in the world to push this forward. He's not as strong as Trump was as an individual. And so it seems to me that what's happening is the deep state in the US and possibly also the Zionist lobby are putting to be much stronger if this deal is to continue. And it's good to see Amir Abdollahian is the Iranian foreign minister, chatting with China's Wang Yi and one of the most, I think, brilliant chess players on the planet, that is Sergei Lavrov from Russia. They are all in line with what needs to be done. The rest of the world, if they can get through the propaganda that goes out on the Western media, everybody knows this deal needs to be re-signed as soon as possible.
And Tony, we know that for possibly the first 9 or 10 months of the Biden administration, that Joe Biden has been somewhat beleaguered with the atrocity that took place in Afghanistan, with basically his low approval ratings. He couldn't get his infrastructure bill. It finally got through today. We know for over $1.2 trillion. It's making its way through Congress. It basically has. So with that arguably with that first win for Joe Biden, do you think that has an impact on removing anti-Tehran sanctions and the U.S. getting back into the JCPOA now swiftly?
Well, I think what we need to see is public pronouncements, and that doesn't take too much effort from Joe Biden to say that this deal must be signed. And if he sends out that clear message, then I think what we would see is that the Zionist lobby would have to back off a bit, although, of course, you know, they're a very powerful group. They're actually increasing their power in London as now. The Zionist lobby is incredibly powerful. They basically control, the Zionist influence controls the UK opposition. And in fact, they've even been getting rid of conservative ministers like Alan Duncan, for example. So they're doing very well in London and Washington. So that's really what Biden is up against. And unless he resolves to make it absolutely clear that he is determined to re-sign this deal. I mean, it's been so interesting, isn't it? All the hot air about climate. But this really does, if there's not a guarantee of Middle East peace. And once that deal is re-signed, I think we'll see many other countries like the Russians and the Chinese, etc., falling into line when it comes to reducing pollution and actually starting to come alongside the West, at least the UK and the United States, supposedly, in reducing their carbon footprint on the world. Now, you know, when it starts to come to the JCPOA, though, we must see the US. Biden has got to send a clear message that he is going to fulfill the promises he made before he was elected. And as I said, as those US sanctions begin to be lifted around the world, Iran can come back into compliance and everyone can sleep a little bit easier around the world and we can get on with the climate battle.
Thank you, Tony. Stay safe. Always a pleasure to check in with you from Bristol. Mr. Tony Gosling, their investigative journalist.